Welcome to the Growth Shift. I'm David Zylstra. Here's what I've learned after years in business. Every leader who's built something meaningful has a story, but the moment they had to shift, when failure forced innovation, when change became opportunity, when they chose growth over comfort. On this show, we dive into those pivotal moments, the setbacks that became breakthroughs, the strategic shifts that accelerated growth, and the frameworks that turn obstacles into opportunities. Because here's the truth. In a world where change is the only constant, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who've learned to shift strategically through it. So whether you're facing your own pivot point or just want to learn from someone who's been there, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Valentix. At Valentix, we help coaches and consultants who are struggling with generating consistent, high-quality leads, automating their client onboarding processes, and scaling their operations without simply adding more hours or headcount. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because they're bogged down in manual tasks and feel like they're missing out on the power of modern technology. But with the right strategy and AI-powered solutions, they're able to streamline their workflows, attract better opportunities, and achieve sustainable growth. If that sounds like you or someone you know, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by David Wiener, CEO of Cash Flow Strategies, a seasoned consultant with a remarkable journey that has led him to become a leading expert in cost segregation and real estate investment tax benefits. David's career began in running a medical practice and then pivoting to consulting and eventually building a robust network of independent contractor agreements. He's a passionate teacher at heart, dedicated to demystifying complex tax strategies for real estate investors and CPAs. David is also actively leveraging AI for content creation and social media, constantly adapting to where the greatest opportunities lie. David, welcome to the Growth Shift.
Thanks so much, David. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have another David on the show, I've got to say. Now, your career journey, it's pretty unique, right? Starting with running a medical practice in the 80s and then moving into consulting. Take us back to those days. I mean, what led you to make that shift from a medical practice that many people would say, man, he must have been doing well for himself, into coaching?
Well, I had actually also worked for a medical billing company, and so I knew a lot of doctors. I went to work for one of them and became the administrator for his practice. That was from 1980 to 1989. But during that time, I constantly was getting calls from other practices saying, well, how do I handle this? And what should I do here? So I thought, well, I could just become a consultant and I can work for all of them. I can continue as a consultant to work on this practice, but then I can help other people as well, and I don't feel like I'm cheating my employer. So I jumped out of the frying pan into the fire and became a consultant in 1989, and have been doing that on and off ever since, mostly on, but some other things as well. And that's kind of how I got into the consulting and the self-employment and all of that kind of stuff.
I mean, that's quite the jump, as you said, from the frying pan into the fire, right? Leaving a medical practice, you were already sort of doing the consulting work, it sounds, on the side anyways, but was there anything specifically that had you decide that, let's leave the practice behind and this is really what I want to pursue in the future?
I just discovered that there are so many medical and dental practices out there that really needed help. And if I spent time working with them or helping them, I felt like I was cheating my employer. So it was not a sudden decision. It came over time, and it was through discussions with my employer, and then moved from that into consulting and continued to work with the same practice as well as other practices. But I felt like I was being fair to everybody that way.
Fantastic, fantastic. So if we look at, who it is you were consulting, other medical practices, surely, medical practices and practitioners make a lot of money. What did they need you for as a consultant?
Well, they don't teach doctors business in medical school or dental school. And so setting up and running an efficient office and watching the cash flow and doing all of those things are not something they want to practice medicine. They want to take great care of their patients. And that's where their skills lie. And it's not in payrolls and receivables and payables and flow through an office and all of that kind of stuff. There's so much more to a medical practice than people realize. And so I handled all the business aspects for them or help them along with the business aspects of their practice and continue to do so to a lesser extent today.
And there was another shift that happened there somewhere along the way, right? Cost segregation. Like, what the heck is that, and how did you come to
Well,
it?
I sort of shifted my consulting when I realized that my doctors were coming to me saying, I'm seeing all the patients I can see, but I'm not making money like I was before. I don't know where my money's going. Well, when I really dug into it, I realized that the problem wasn't their revenue. They were making plenty of revenue. Their problem was cash flow. They didn't understand it. They didn't really know where their money was going. They didn't understand how to collect the money that they were owed by patients. And so I started to focus my consulting on their cash flow specifically. And that's when Cash Flow Strategies was born. I had a lot of friends who also did other things that could help medical practices. And I used to refer the doctors to my friends who worked in areas like merchant services and HIPAA compliance and cost segregation and all of those things. Doctors are not the best at business. And so I would recommend them, but they never really reached out to the people who could help them. And they'd try maybe once, and if they didn't hear back, they wouldn't try anymore. So I came to the decision that I needed to be able to be a one-stop shop for them. And so I began vetting the best of these companies that did all these things that could help the doctors and began signing independent contractor agreements with all of those companies so that they could just come to me and I could handle whatever they needed. One of those things was cost segregation. It was one of the last things I got involved in because it's pretty technical. And it took me a while to really understand what it was and to vet companies and do those kinds of things. And it all kind of came to a head when I had a doctor friend of mine, a client of mine, who said, "Hey, I'm buying a standalone bank branch and I'm putting my practice in the bank branch. Is there any way I can save some money with that?" And I said, "Yes, you could do a cost segregation study on your building and it would save you a lot of taxes." I wasn't exactly sure at that point how, but I knew it would work. So I began to study and I signed an agreement with Cost Segregation Services, Inc., which is the oldest and the largest provider of engineering-based cost segregation in the U.S. Fortunately, I guess, I'm a bit of a quick study and spent a lot of time learning all the technical aspects of cost segregation. We did a study for him. We saved him over $200,000 in his taxes,
Wow.
which definitely helped his cash flow. So I realized, hey, this cost segregation thing, there's something to this. And I began to really work at it and study at it. And it started out by helping a few doctors. And then I realized there are a lot more people out there who could benefit from this. Well, as I began reaching out to real estate investors and real estate brokers and things like that, the cost segregation business grew and grew and grew. And it took maybe a year or two before that was the highest stream of income that I had. I came to the realization, too, at that point that very few people understand it, even real estate investors. And so, being, as you said, having the heart of a teacher, I began seeking out some speaking engagements around the country. I had already done a lot of speaking specifically for cost segregation. Prime example, I had a room of 350 seasoned real estate investors at a conference in Vegas. And we started out by saying, how many of you guys are familiar with cost segregation? I expected everybody in the room to put their hands up. Out of 350, there were less than 2 dozen. So I said, well, how many of you guys have ever done cost segregation? 6 people raised their hand. They were all clients of mine. And one guy stood up in the back and said, yeah, we've done over 20 properties together and I haven't paid taxes in years and I don't expect to pay any going forward. And everybody kind of turned to look and see who this guy was. Well, then I became a subject of interest and the business kept growing and growing. During COVID, I also did the employee retention credit because a lot of my practices were forced to keep their employees but not have them working. And so we were able to get a bunch of people the employee retention credit. That kind of went away. So I let that go by the wayside. Cost segregation has become a passion of mine and has become the by far the highest income stream in my business. I still consult with medical and dental professionals. I still work with a large number of practices all over the country now, helping them especially collect their patient accounts receivable. But cost segregation is my first love anymore. And the time I spend more of my time on that than anything else.
Wow, incredible. So you went from medical practice to, obviously doing very well with the business acumen to helping other medical practitioners with the business acumen and realizing along the way that there was this massive opportunity with cost segregation. You
Yeah,
succeeded, you doubled down, you went hard forwards with the cost segregation, and it became your main revenue stream. I mean, we're saying these words a lot, cost segregation, but for those of us who aren't so studied as you, can you break that down into
sure.
understandable words?
I can give you the 30,000-foot view.
Yes.
Typically, when you buy a piece of rental property or commercial property, the easy way to do your depreciation is to just depreciate the entire building over either 27 and a half or 39 years, depending on the type of building. But that's not really the best way to do it, and it's not the most effective way to do it, but that's the easy way for most tax professionals to do because they can't do a cost segregation study. So what a cost segregation study does is there are pieces and parts of those properties that can be depreciated at 5 years, 7 years, or 15 years. Well, when you shorten the period of time of depreciation, obviously the deductions go way up. Now, as of 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we were given 100% bonus depreciation. So what that means is all of that 5, 7, and 15-year property could be taken as a deduction 100% the very first year. Now that ended at the end of 2022 and it began to go down, but thanks to the big beautiful bill, we now have 100% bonus depreciation back, and it's permanent this time. And so this has been quite a year for people saying, wow, I need to get this stuff done. And I know a lot of people who are buying real estate to take advantage of that because a good significant portion of that can be taken as a big deduction the first year and maybe even wipe out your taxes altogether.
Wow. So, I mean, it seems like, and I think most, of course, real estate investors and many business owners as well are familiar with deferring their taxes through depreciation, through property. But it sounds like your cost segregation is almost a repackaged form of that, where you can shrink the time frames and increase the tax deductions and even sometimes completely eliminate people's taxes on a yearly basis.
It doesn't get you any additional depreciation. All it does is front load it for you because like I know, like anybody who's astute in business knows, a dollar today is worth more than a dollar next year. So I always liken it to the lottery with people and say, why do you think people take a lesser amount as a lump sum right at the beginning? Because it will earn them more money in the long run than taking it over however many years they plan on paying them. And, if I was going to give you $1 million, do you want me to give it to you in 39 segments over the next 39 years, or do you want it all right now? Obviously, you want it all right now. Well, that's what cost segregation does for them. And so what a lot of the seasoned real estate investors are doing is they purchase a couple of properties, they do a cost segregation study on them. The increased deductions basically wipe out their taxes, but what they do is they take that extra money that they're getting back and they use that for down payments for properties next year and the next year and the next year. And that's how they roll forward without paying any taxes.
The snowball rolls and grows.
Exactly. Yeah.
Incredible.
And so many people have misconceptions about it. Because if you go out on the internet, there's all kind. I've had CPAs tell their clients that this is a scam. You can't do it. I've had CPAs tell people, we just don't mess with those. That's because they don't want to bother applying them when we provide them all the reports. But there are a lot of myths. My building's too small. My building's too old. We can go back 15 years. The properties that you purchased 10 years ago, you can still do a cost segregation study on them and you don't have to refile your taxes.
Wow. That's extremely beneficial for you, knowing this is maybe not your bread and butter, but your main winner.
That's not where the 100% bonus is. But even if you didn't get the bonus depreciation, cost segregation is still a great deal.
So you're working with real estate investors and some business owners to leverage cost segregation. Now, you mentioned one of your first clients, you were able to write off $200,000 in taxes for him. Is that the client that you had the most success with? I mean, how much? Can you tell us a story about who it is that you've had like the greatest results with this? Because I think, depending on how much property you have, this guy could be the limit. But
I was introduced to the owner of a flight school at the Henderson, Nevada airport. And he said, I'm not going to do a cost segregation study. They're way too expensive. I said, okay, what do you mean by too expensive? And he said, I've had quotes on doing a cost segregation of $25,000 and whatever, and I said, let me give a shot at it. I can do a free estimate for anybody that'll lock in the price and show you what the estimated benefits would be. I can do them all day long, even if they're looking at property. So I said, just let me do an estimate. Let's see what it would come out to be. I'm sure we wouldn't charge near that much. So he said, all right, okay, I guess we'll do it. So we did the estimate for him. The pricing came out at somewhere around 10,000, and we estimated that we were going to be able to save him $1 million. That's
like
a good R.
That's insane. That's what, 1% on
That's a
99%
good
ROI?
ROI. When we finally, he said, okay, let's do it. When we finally did the study, I called him and I said, man, we were really off on the estimate. And he said, really, why? And I said, because we saved you over 2 million.
Wow. That's ground shaking. So, I mean, David, this is like this. People should. I don't know. My brain is just screaming right now. So, you're telling me that in an exceptional scenario, you're saving your clients $2 million. Meanwhile, there's CPAs and accountants out there who are saying, "No, I don't want to do that. This is a scam." There's people who don't even know about this.
That's it.
How do you connect with people who you can help? If like, I'm so flabbergasted that people are not aware of these advantages.
I have been told that two things that people fear most are death and public speaking.
Yeah.
I love public speaking. And so I fly all over the country. I'm heading to Los Angeles next. I was in Sacramento, California not too long ago. I'm heading to Los Angeles next month and to Las Vegas next month to talk to groups of real estate investors, introduce them to the concept, clarify any misconceptions that they have, answer all their questions. And for the real estate people, I make a deal with them, and if they refer somebody to me, I'll pay them 10%.
Pretty sweet deal on both sides.
And I have some large real estate CPA firms that routinely just send all their clients to me. And that's how I built my business, was through referrals with CPAs and real estate brokers and those kinds of things. One real estate broker in Las Vegas has me back every year to teach his agents how to be more effective by introducing them to me, by introducing their clients to me and getting cost segregation. They get to be the hero, which is great. I love that. But I love teaching about cost segregation because you can watch the light bulb over their heads light up, all of a sudden they realize, wow, I really didn't understand this. And so I love doing that.
That's amazing. So
yeah.
you love speaking on stage, right? One of those things that most people fear, or many people fear the most. You can get in front of some pretty great audiences and, spread the word, grow your business in that way. I'm kind of curious, is this your strategy for continuing to grow, is just getting in front of more people, speaking on more stages, or, what else is there for you?
Social media is big for me. I do a ton of social media, and I'm constantly putting out videos, canceling the myths and teaching about little specific subjects. Cost segregation isn't for everybody because there are certain rules about how you apply it. So it has to be some income generating property. You can't do your personal residence. And if it's residential property, especially if it's a long-term rental, it's immediately assumed to be passive for taxes, which means all those deductions we get, you can only apply against your passive income, which in their cases are generally their rental income, unless you qualify with the IRS as a real estate professional. And what that requires is, it's not about a real estate license. You must spend 750 hours at least working in real estate business and transactions, and it must be 50% of your working hours in the year. So a lot of people with W-2s, they can't meet that. And then you also must be materially participating in your property, which means you're spending more time working in the property than anybody else, basically. So otherwise it's passive. Now for a short-term rental, they have what commonly known as the short-term loophole, but I don't like it because it's not a loophole. It's part of the tax code. You do not have to have a real estate professional designation for that. So if you own an Airbnb and you materially participate, you can use the deductions against your W-2 income, which there's hundreds that I've done this year for that are small investors. They own a couple of Airbnbs, even one Airbnb. They book the cleaning crew. They do that kind of stuff. They're not using a management firm that does everything, and they can use those deductions against their W-2 income. So long live short-term rentals. And for a short-term rental, it has to be an average rental period of less than 7 days or less. So like an Airbnb or a VRBO or those kinds of things. But there's a ton of them out there, even more every day. They're really popular right now, and they're great for taxes.
David, I'm curious about something. I mean, personally, I've spent a lot of time studying real estate and real estate investing. I follow all of the great influencers and read all of the great books, and I've never heard anything about cost segregation, although it seems to be an incredibly advantageous strategy that you can use. I mean, in today's market, with the strategy and the offer and how you can help people, I mean, what sort of challenges are you facing that, to really get this out and to, I suppose, spread the word a little bit more?
There are a number of challenges. One is all the misconceptions about cost segregation. I have to constantly be beating down the misconception. I do a lot of that through doing those free estimates. And then they look at it, they go, wow, I didn't realize, I'm not in this just simply for sales. So I'm going to talk to them and I'm going to make sure this is something that would benefit them, or I won't allow them to do a cost segregation study. I'm not out to sell you if you don't need it. And so people trust me and they come back to me and that sort of thing. The other thing is there are several methods of doing cost segregation. There's only one method that the IRS recommends. And it's called engineering-based cost segregation based on documentation. Engineering-based studies based on documentation. That's all we do. There are places where you can get other kinds of studies cheaper, but good luck, if you have to deal with the IRS, if they happen to audit you. I had a client in Florida who challenged me on the price of a couple of studies, and he said, man, I had a friend who did 6 Cost-Seg studies on his properties, and he only paid like $1,000 for each. And I said, he did a DIY study, didn't he? And he said, yeah, I think so. And the DIY studies are out there. You can go on a website, feed in some information, and it spits out a report. It's not accurate, but it's something you can say, I did a cost segregation study. The next year when I talked to my client, he went ahead and did it with me. And the next year when I talked to him about some more properties, he said, oh, that guy I told you about? He got audited, and the penalties and interest that he had to pay were like 3 times what you would have charged him to do a cost segregation study. So I gave him your name and number, expect to get a call from him. I did, and he's now working with me.
No surprise there.
But how many do I not know about that I can't save? That worries me. That keeps me up, I want to save everybody. But we've done over 55,000 of these studies. Founder actually invented the modern method of doing cost segregation. We've done over 55,000 of them. And you know how many times we've triggered an audit? Zero. Never. So, and if they're ever audited on something else and the study's called into question during the audit, we will defend it at no charge to them for as long as it takes.
Quite a service you're providing there, David.
It's bulletproof.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So with all of this considered, you're educating, you're teaching, you're getting in front of more people, you're providing quotes and, an unbelievable service through and through. Now, you're doing a lot of this on your own, it sounds like, as well. Where does AI start to come into play for you to be able to make this easier?
AI is great for me in a few different areas. One, especially with my social media. I will take this podcast recording and run it through an AI program that'll chop it up into 1-minute sound bites and shorts to put on my YouTube channel or my Instagram and all those kinds of things. So I use that all the time. I use AI to help develop some videos based on different topics that I feed to it. And I also use it for research, a number of different AI programs to do research on strange tax laws, how to make a real complicated subject simple for the audience as I'm building my presentations and things. AI helps me out with a ton of that. So yeah, and I've even dabbled a little bit with using AI to help me build a little bit better looking PowerPoints for when I go out and speak. They're definitely more AI is definitely more creative than I am. So the graphics.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you there, gotta say. So were you doing all of these things manually yourself before, the content, the presentations, or?
Yeah. Now, the company provides some presentations and things, but it was never exactly what I wanted to use. And so I'd have to go chop them up and put them back together again. And, I've used people like Fiverr, where you hire somebody over in Indonesia somewhere that will do that stuff for you. And it worked pretty well. But AI, I can do it. I can work with AI myself and tweak things. And so I use it pretty much every day.
How much time do you think it's been saving you, just knowing that you've gone from that manual process, as we all have, into now leveraging AI? I mean, it sounds like you're doing a lot with it.
I'd have to hire a staff. I'd have to hire a staff if I didn't have AI to use because I am a one-man operation.
Hmm.
Now, I don't do the actual cost segregation studies. I don't do the estimates. I feed the information back to the company and they provide it for me. But I'm still the face to all of my clients, hundreds of them, probably thousands of them. So yeah, it takes a lot of time. I work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So my wife says, can we go on vacation? Well, yeah, but I got to take my computer because I got to work. And so I've worked all over the world, in Ireland and in Barbados. And as long as I got internet and my computer and my AI companion, I'm good.
Living the life of every, 20, 24-year-old wannabe entrepreneur traveling the world.
Well, I learned
Working
at an
in-
early age I never want to work for somebody else anymore. I like working for me. I get to get paid what I'm actually worth rather than what somebody says I'm worth. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride. I was really scared the first time I became an independent contractor. Didn't have a regular paycheck coming in, but it's kind of paid off for me over the years.
Certainly.
And I'm 69 years old. So, my wife says, "Are you ever going to retire?" Heck no. Why would I retire? I love what I'm doing.
What would you do with your time?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Now, David, your journey is such a testament to adapting to market needs, right? Right from the beginning, from going from medical practice to consultant and to growing into what you're doing now. For other consultants or independent contractors who are looking to identify new opportunities as you did and pivot their services to where the money is, what's one key piece of actionable advice that you might offer them?
You've got to look for the needs. I don't know who originally I heard this from, but they said if you find a need and fill it, you'll never have to worry about having things to do and work. I keep looking at what do my clients really need? What's the most important thing I could do to help them? And sometimes it's completely different than what I've been doing in the past, like getting into cost segregation, like getting into the employee retention credit. Nobody knew what that was before COVID. And then just putting my efforts there and going into it. And if you keep the clients at the forefront, serve their needs, you'll never go hungry.
Mic drop. David, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your wisdom with us today. For other listeners who want to learn more about cost segregation or real estate tax benefits, maybe just to connect with you to carry on the conversation, what would be the best way for them to find you or your resources?
They can feel free to call me. Best number for me is 770-504. They can email me at david.wiener, and it's Wiener. You can see on the screen, david.wiener at cashflowstrategies.us. And I am everywhere on social media. They can come find me.
Now, sharing your phone number with the audience, that's a bold move. I don't know if your wife would be too happy with you spending more time working as a result. David,
She knows I love it.
thank you so much for joining us today on The Growth Shift.
My pleasure, David. It was great to be with you.
And that's a wrap on another episode of The Growth Shift. If this conversation sparked something for you, whether it's a new perspective on failure, a strategy you want to try, or just the reminder that every setback can become a setup for something bigger, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who shift strategically through it. If you're ready to build the systems that help you grow without the chaos, head over to valentix.io. We help businesses like yours scale smarter, not harder. I'm David Zylstra, and I'll see you in the next shift.